The Seminoles land a big-time 2027 recruit, and there's a lot to talk about from Florida State spring practice.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Florida State, congratulations on adding another really good player to the class of 27, Kaneilius Purdy, wide receiver at Lake Wales High School in Polk County. That's a great county for football. This is a kid that was dominant as a sophomore, some of the best hands in the country. One-handed catches, contested catches, taking the ball away from people when they're right in front of him. He has hands, he has timing, he has strength, he has route running. This is an advanced football player. But before I go any further, let me be clear. While he's good at receiver, he could play 3 or 4 positions. Let me explain. When you are roughly 6 foot, 190 pounds, and built like he is, this, again, advanced physically, there is no question. If you go look up Kaneilius Purdy's film, it'll be self-explanatory in 4 or 5 clips real quick. If you have those kinds of skills, running back, slot, outside receiver, where he almost exclusively plays for Lake Wales, those are all options. He also plays free safety. You could use him in the box. Because of his hand-eye coordination, he could probably be a really unique nickel. This is a player that could go all over the field for Florida State. And don't forget special teams. Guys with that kind of hand-eye coordination, punt returner, kick returner. He could be a gunner. He could be a player that you want to try to charge in and block the punt because he understands the spot to the ball, like where it's going to come off the punter's foot. All of these things come into play when you're that athletic, that strong. And again, the hand-eye coordination and the strength that this young man has, he's really impressive. I knew he was good because Florida State's not going to just offer random sophomores in high school, but his film, again, just showed all of that. So the Noles are now up to not 1, not 2, but 3 Florida State commitments for the class of 2027. The other 2 kids I've talked about before, Jalen Scott, he's out of Williamson High School in Mobile, really good football program, and he's a kid that can go get it. And then you got Mekhi Williams, another safety, a kid I talked about recently when he committed. Really, really surprising that not that many people had offered him or he hadn't gotten much attention. Mekhi Williams is good. He's out of Ruskin, Florida, and he goes to Leonard High School. He's the long-rangey safety that could possibly play nickel, play receiver, play corner, whatever. He's another kid that's very, very valuable. So the Noles are off to a tremendous 2027 recruiting start. Now, can they keep it going? With that, a couple of questions for everybody. Why is it that Florida State has suddenly just not only done well with 27, they got 3 guys committed that are really good. They're going to end up being recruited by everybody. How is that possible when it's been pretty much a roller coaster with 26? I know it's a little more competitive and they're recruiting their own backyard, but again, why is it that there's some up and down with quarterback recruiting that I've talked about extensively in the last week, especially for last night's update? I'll explain more about that momentarily, but it's really unique. They're off to a fantastic start, even after a 2-10 season for kids that are current sophomores going into their junior years. The juniors going into the senior season, it's been a mixed bag. One moment, I think they're starting to get some energy going, or it's really going to get ramped up, but then they'll have a setback. Again, I'll get into the quarterback stuff momentarily. It's really, really unique. But as they say, recruiting every day is a different story, man. You got to recruit 24/7, 365, because so much can change so quick. I talk about that all the time, so I'm kind of going against my own grain here, but it is mind-blowing sometimes when you can get these kids. But a few of the other guys that I thought they might get in the 26 class based on the visits, they haven't even lined up OVs yet, or they're not making as much ground up as I thought they would. It's really hard to follow a teenager sometimes, I guess, is the easiest thing. Now, some quick notes here while I'm on the subject of recruiting about the quarterback position. Just want to go over it. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to interview Landon Duckworth. Again, full disclosure on everything. I'm just going to give the clip notes here. But I did a podcast last night here on Locked On Seminoles. You can look it up on the channel, whether it's YouTube, Odyssey, Spotify, Apple, wherever you want. But this quarterback situation is just so up in the air. They have to hit a home run in this class at quarterback. Home run. They got to get the guy. And right now, they have a chance with Duckworth. They certainly do. They've got an OB scheduled. But no doubt, he openly said to my face that Ole Miss is the staff he's got the best relationship with. That generally ends up being the team that lands the player. Something could change, but he's been to Ole Miss a couple of times this spring. I think it's just FSU once. I could be wrong, but he doesn't have any plans to get back anywhere right now. We'll see if he does. And he's got his OVs. Florida State, I believe, is the third one, but the date is not as important as the fact that, again, Ole Miss is the team to kind of watch, and they're also getting the last visit. I don't know if Lane Kiffin tried to do it that way, but that's interesting. Finally, on quarterback recruiting, the other disappointing news, Bo Bentley, they had seemingly done well with his unofficial visit. The Noles have been eliminated. They're not even in the final three. So again, the 27 recruiting shooting up the charts. 26 is a roller coaster, especially at quarterback. I don't know what to make of it. We'll see if that changes or not, but it is a little bit interesting. Now on to the beginning of some notes overall on the scrimmage that happened this past weekend for the Florida State Seminoles. It's hard to get a whole lot of information because, let's just be blunt here, everybody's being pretty guarded, but at least from what Norvell, the coordinators have said afterwards, there were some names mentioned. Like, we need depth chart and stats to really follow this. Full disclosure on that as well. They are absolutely going out of their way not to give away anything. I think it's quite honestly a lot to do with the fact they play Bama first. And secondarily, everybody is beyond paranoid about their players getting poached. And I'm going to do a full thing on that on the Portal podcast, and I'll probably drop some of it here too on Locked On Seminoles. But we need to get rid of the spring window. I am 100% convinced of that based on how spring is going right now, not just at Florida State, but across college football. Closing spring games. Everybody's afraid their players are going to get poached because people can watch the games on TV. So again, I'm going to do a full podcast on that on the Portal podcast. Make sure you check that out as well if you do not know about it yet. It's same thing as here Locked On Seminoles, but it's all recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal. Now, as far as the spring goes, everybody wanted to know, hey, are we going to have an offensive line? Are we going to be able to like forge out a running game, etc.? Coach White was talking. You had Malzahn discussing. You had some of the players kind of stand out that you would think, and I'll talk about Darrell Jackson here about 5 or 10 minutes, but just offensively, and Norvell touched on this a little bit, the run game, while it had a few plays where they got stuffed, I mean, that's going to happen in a scrimmage. They had like 110 plays or something. It's a lot. So first, second, third string, everybody got action. They had a decent running game, and they had some big plays. If I took anything else away from this, it's more encouraging than that. I don't know how it could be, because last year trying to watch Florida State's run game and dissecting it and going back through the film was hard. I didn't get to see the scrimmage, just like nobody else did that wasn't in the stadium, but that was great news to me. Also, I think it's good that multiple running backs are being brought up. And I know, again, it's not a depth chart, but Pettibone, the transfer from Wake Forest, who's being slotted as a center, he was lauded as a standout. If your center is really good, to me, I can only assume, again, I wasn't there, that it's not that you're just blocking. The center is the quote-unquote the captain, the center point, the quarterback, the guy that makes the calls. He's the one that transcends everything. Because if your center can't make reads and adjustments to what the front is for the opposing defense, you are dead in the water. If they're starting to gash teams, and Florida State's front seven is actually pretty talented. We'll see how good they can tackle and how much they do in terms of effort once the games get here in the fall. But based on the personnel, it should be pretty darn good. You got Stephon come over from Nebraska to help. Same kind of thing with Pettibone, calling the plays, etc. They should be pretty good. Darrell Jackson's being lauded. Again, get into that in a moment. So I was happy to hear that the running game had a few big plays. I knew they were going to get some stuffs. Defense always wins spring everywhere because defense is a lot easier in the spring compared to offense because everybody's got to be on the same page on offense. Just one or two guys on defense can do a great job and you can destroy an offensive play. It's not always that way, but you have a better chance. Offensively, one guy's out of kilter out of the 11 and it's a 6-yard loss. It's harder. But at the same time, I was just glad that both sides had some advantages. The thing that was interesting was Coach White was talking about it and some of the other people that have covered it and watched the press conference, they noted this. Malzahn wants to be 60-40 run to pass. Now, how you want to define that is up to you. And we're going to talk about that next. Does that fit what Florida State has for their personnel? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Seminoles. March Madness is here, and so is the Final Four, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to take in all the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 on anything from buzzer beaters and everything else in the Final Four. So find out for you who's going to be cutting down the nets and all the way through. How is it going to go down? Well, that's up to you because you could place bets on halftime score, guys going to have the leading score. There's a million different ways to do it. And for me, the most fascinating thing is Houston. I was at an event, the Elite 11 this past weekend, and a buddy of mine said, man, Houston is putting it on Tennessee. They're up 29-12. And I was like, holy cow. Houston, if they score, that's a team that I don't know if anybody's going to beat them, but most people didn't pick them to win the tournament. If you don't want to pick on the one team, maybe it's just a halftime score. Houston obviously figured out Tennessee's game plan and blitzkrieged them. So there's a lot of ways to do this with FanDuel, and I think it's a really intriguing opportunity because all four of the teams, Duke, Florida, Auburn, in addition to Houston, any of them are capable of winning. It's really unique. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoop action all the way through to the championship game. Should Florida State be a 60-40 team? And further, is Gus Malzahn talking about 60-40 after the plays are happening? What I mean by that is some passing plays end up being running plays because the quarterback takes off. I'm not sure on that. I'm guessing that he's going to call 60% runs to passes, but there's also another caveat, and that's RPOs. That makes it really, really hard. So anyway, to make a long story short, Malzahn's offenses, they typically do best when the run game is really good in the A-gaps. It's not the most complex thing in the world at the end of the day. His offense does not work with all the screens and bombs, the trick plays, the outside option plays, the RPO, the reverse pass, any of that stuff. Because if the linebackers aren't sucked down, if the safety isn't coming into the box, you're not throwing it over people's heads, and you're certainly not going to get to the ball to the perimeter with as much ease if the linebackers aren't really worried about the A-gap and even to an extent the B-gap. It's not going to work. Again, that's one of the reasons I was really happy to hear about Pettibone, by the way. That's a good sign. If he's calling the right plays, which got to be one of the reasons that he's being applauded, it's probably as much, if not more important up front for how he's checking into the right calls than how he blocks Darrell Jackson, the linebackers getting to the second level or finding a safety on a screen. That's a good sign. So here's my next question. Is it good news that he was brought out and discussed? Or is it still concerning because that's really like one of the only guys that was directly named by coaching staff? I mean, it's so hard with this, and it's why I hate the fact they all but closed practices. It makes it difficult. We'll see. Rodell was discussed quite a bit as a running back. Jalen, he's a guy that had a big play. That's somebody that Malzahn didn't mention. Everybody knows by now I'm a big fan. I think Jalen's going to be a really important player. Maybe you don't always get him. Jalen Lucas, not the biggest guys. You're not going to give him 18 runs. But if you give him 6-8 carries a game and you throw it to him 2 or 3 times and just fake a few times to him, maybe you can get a tight end, act like he's going to block, and you throw down the field off a fake block. There's so many ways that Florida State can attack. But again, it starts with the inside run game with Malzahn. If they can do that, we're going to be good. So here are a couple of questions. Number one, when you have Rodell, you got Sam Singleton, you got Cam Davis, you got Jalen, what is the best plan of attack generically in terms of the personnel? Would you rather see 2 running backs in the backfield? 1? Would you like to see a lot of motion with the running backs? Or would you just like to see, like Gus will sometimes go 100 mile an hour with the offense, just line up, run RPO and inside zone? Sometimes his best offense is ungodly generic. It's just downhill. And unless they commit an extra defender to the inside, they just run inside dive, basically. It's an inside zone play, maybe an occasional gap play. That's it. And then when that DN really starts chopping down, the quarterback will pull it and he'll head around in. It's 2 or 3 plays off of it. That's it. Now, the other part with that, of course, you're not substituting a lot, which kind of goes against this. But when they do substitute, like, how would you like the rotation to be? Sounds like Rodell's the main guy. Maybe he's not going to be long-term, but we'll see. Now to the defense. Again, Coach White has discussed, the new defense coordinator, Tony White, how Darrell Jackson could be the best defensive tackle in all of college football. I've lost track. Is that the second or the third time since Tony White has been on campus at Florida State that he pronounced that as a possibility? Is this just A, him speaking his mind, B, trying to motivate Darrell Jackson Jr., or C, a combination of A and B? I'm going C. But I think that he really likes what he's seen. He's talked about Darrell utilizing the defense better in terms of understanding what he's supposed to do. And when he just applies the techniques, and of course, coaches want everybody to do exactly what they say anyway. I get that. But when he applies the techniques, it works out. He talked about he had a play that he stuffed a running back for a 5-yard loss. Well, Darrell's 6'6", 330, and he could move. So I get it. He can do that. But Florida State needs consistency out of him. And I'm just going to make this statement. I'm not even asking a question. I have to see it. After studying Darrell closely last year early on and being appalled, and especially the North Carolina and Notre Dame games, Darrell's got to prove it to me. And he pretty much is going to have to prove it all the way through the season for the NFL scouts, because if he didn't, he would already be in the NFL draft. That's just reality, because you cannot teach the traits the young man has. He is unbelievably gifted. If he is as truly motivated as what Coach Tony White says, there is absolutely, unequivocally, no excuse for him not to be on All-American lists at the end of the 25 season. I don't give a crap about preseason prognostications. All these things people talk about. The magazines will come out. The previews will come out. Florida State sites will talk about it, because July and early August, there's nothing else to talk about. I get it. I might even make some kind of prediction on where he might finish. I still need a lot more intel, but it's at least on my mind. But as far as a hardline prediction, no, I don't have any idea. He had far too many woes. But if he's setting the standard now, that's all you can ask, because we're at the end of March. The spring scrimmage, or whatever they're going to call it, that showcase that they're going to have, it's probably just going to be private, not going to show anything, which, again, I hate. Whatever that is in the film they study is probably what Coach White and everybody's going to talk about the most. But again, if Darrell is consistent, not only is he helping the team just because of his play, he's setting it up for everybody else. You have to double him if he's taking it serious. There are 5 guys in college football in the interior that play after play are going to line up against Big Darrell and handle it. It ain't going to happen. So I want to see what he does against UF, what he does against Clemson, what he does against Miami. I mean, those are important, and I expect him to show up in those games. But here's the caveat. What does Darrell do against the teams that, let's be blunt, Florida State is way better? Those are sometimes the games where he just goes in and out of, like the Georgia Tech game last year. No offense to Tech, because they took it to Florida State. They're not better. They wanted it more. They were coached better. Those two things were very evident by the end of the first half, let alone the game. But Florida State's talent kept them in it because they just had better ball players. If Darrell sets the standard and they got to start doubling him, Florida State's going to eat up the run game for most teams. We'll see if I'm right, but I'm pretty confident on that. When we come back, this is one of my favorite things to do. I'm going to talk a little bit about the defense from an overall perspective, some predictions and whatnot for both sides of the ball. But it sounds like from Coach White, not only is Darrell playing well, but they've gotten a different energy level. Thank the Lord for that. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Seminoles. All-out hustle never goes out of style. When I was growing up, Florida State's defense was probably as aggressive and did a better job of getting 11 hats to the football than almost any team in college football year in and year out. You could have argued Notre Dame or A&M, maybe USC one year, maybe Miami or something, but over, say, the late 80s to the early 2000s, Florida State's defense, from a totality standpoint, there was no doubt. In my opinion, it was the best defense year in, year out with not only executing, just effort. And the brand that Florida State is trying to get back to is similar. Now, the defense alignments and all that, of course, the players are different. But I like what Coach White's talking about. And he brought up a play that Elijah Herring made where he made a tackle 40 yards down the field. So somebody screwed up. But it was a play at the 10-yard line. So at least he stopped the touchdown. Maybe you hold him to a field goal. Okay. Well, the very next play, there was a pick six by the Florida State defense. If Elijah Herring doesn't hustle and run down the guy that got the big gain and he punches it, well, not only do you not score, the other team just gets an explosive for a touchdown. Those are the kinds of plays that Florida State always used to have. Not only because they had a better athlete, but because they hustled. That's why I started watching Florida State football when I was young. Those kinds of things happened all the time. You're not going to always stop the other team. I get that. They're going to pop some plays. They give out scholarships too. That drove me nuts last year. There were too many times where the guys in the front seven, I don't care if it was a linebacker or a safety in the box, D lineman, D, whatever. If a player got by him, they didn't immediately put on the jets and go after him. What Coach White's talking about and what little we've been able to get, again, there's just no practice video that's worthwhile. I need to see literal screens and full-on run plays and everything where players are chasing the actual video, and they're not going to show us any. But it's at least a good sign that they're talking about that. I don't care who it is, even if you're probably out of the play. How many times have you seen a highlight video where a guy's 15 yards behind, he gets back into the play, and the running back's kind of held up, the ball pops out, and the last guy to the pile gets the fumble recovery. The last guy to the pile brings down the guy at the last second with a shoestring tackle to prevent a touchdown. Then, a pick six. Something like that happens. Florida State, again, not only did they have a really good day with the defense from what Coach White was talking about, Earl Little Jr. was the guy that got the pick six. It could have been somebody else, though, but the effort overall was there. He also talked about Jabril Rawls. He's a guy competing for a starting job. He's a redshirt sophomore as a kid. I know, actually, he's out of Pensacola. That's another DB that's emerged. It's finally fun to talk about Florida State's defense. It has been a while. Maybe this is a team that's going to be a little bit better against the pass than I thought. I knew they would have some moments, and I think the secondary will be good because they got a lot of talent. But I didn't know if they were going to be able to replace Azariah Thomas. That's a guy that's pretty a unique player. So you need to prove it. But they've got so many options now, and guys are stepping up. Earl Little has been talked about a lot. Rawls is starting to get a lot of talk. And there they have some guys coming back like Sheen Brown that are going to contribute quite a bit. So I feel better about the secondary than what I did even a week ago. And I was already high on the ability to stuff the run because, again, they've got so many big bodies and they've got good coaches. And nothing against the players in Nebraska, as I've said about 20 times on this show. But Florida State's got more talent than Nebraska, and it's the same coaching staff. And they had a top 10 defense against the run the very first year they were at Nebraska. I like Florida State's chances to conservatively finish in the top 25 and probably in the top 15 in the run defense category this next year. We'll see if I'm right. Now for a couple of just projections, and I want your takes on this. I'm just going to go through the positions on both sides of the ball, Where I feel best, where I'm concerned, and I'll give a little recap of why. Let's just start at quarterback. I feel pretty good about it because Thomas Castellanos, as Gus Malzahn talked about in his press conference, he already knew the offense a little bit from when he was with me at UCF, but he's also played college football as a starter for a couple of years. And he's right. That ability to know what it's like behind center, either you've got it or you don't. I feel good about quarterback. My only concern is if he goes down, I think Florida State's in trouble. I don't think they have anybody else on the roster that is even remotely ready to run Gus's offense. That is a concern. And when I mean run it, I mean they have to flat out understand it at breakneck speed. Not just I'm a good athlete, not just I'm good, like breakneck speed. It takes time. So I think Florida State would take a catastrophic step back if Castellanos got banged up. Running back, I feel good because they've just got a lot of guys. They've got so many options. I talked about that earlier in the podcast. Who starts? Which packages? Do they rotate? Who plays in the slot? These are great problems to have. Not worried about running back at all. Where I'm hopeful, and I'm just going with hopeful on this, is receiver. It's obvious Deuce is going to be a really big-time player for them. But who's, again, as I've said throughout the spring and before it started, who's the number 2? They must have a definitive number 2, or Deuce is going to get double teamed and the linebacker to his side is going to shade. They're going to take him out of the game. I also want to see Landon Thomas involved in the running backs, again, Jalen Lucas, etc. And that might be how Florida State just annoys teams to death, especially on third down, running backs and tight ends. And that's fine. Landon Thomas, NFL player. Get him the football. That is fine. Jalen Lucas on a screen. How many linebackers are going to deal with him? It's good that he's been active during spring ball too, as noted by the coaching staff. So I'm feeling better about pass game overall, but receiver, I'm still a little nervous. We'll see. Where I'm concerned, and I will be until I see the game against Alabama. Just straight up on this, I don't care what they tell me. I'm concerned about it because cohesiveness with an offensive line is paramount, and you got 4 transfers likely to start. That's hard, and then I don't have any confidence in the depth because nobody's proven on the roster that's coming back. When I mean proven, like every single game they were consistent last year. They don't have that guy. So most concerned is O-line, but I'm guessing just about every prognosticator is going to say the same thing. And they should. Let's see. On defense, where I feel best, again, is defensive backs. It's just so many athletes and DBs overall. I don't know if they'll, again, be able to have somebody like Thomas at corner, but I think overall they've just got enough experience and athleticism. They'll be pretty good. Will they tackle well in space and do some of the little things with the fits and all that based on the new scheme? I don't know. They're not going to play as much man, but they should be pretty good overall. Where I'm a little bit concerned, but I think it's at least rounding up into shape because of the transfers, like Elijah Herring, would be linebacker. I would put it as okay. We'll have to see. D-line, I would put as feel really good, except for they've had the injuries. That ticks me off. Like when you have guys banged up and out of the lineup, that sucks. You don't get to see how it's going to really line up. Like Daniel Lyons, that really sucks that he's not getting to play right now. But what are you going to do? You know, he got banged up. So we'll see. I am happy with James Williams and all that. Now you just got to kind of formulate who starts where and how does your rotation work. You know, is KJ Sampson going to play nose guard only? Is back up Darrell? Is he going to play defensive end some? Or is Darrell going to move over? All those things got to take care of themselves. But I'm optimistic in the terms of at least they've got the bodies. Florida State is one of the few schools that can run a 3-man front and be fine. I think they'll be in a pretty good spot. As overall for the defense, now it's, again, the same thing I was talking about with Darrell earlier. Just do you hustle? The talent is there. The coaching's proven from the guys that came over, and you got Surtain coming back. You got JP at linebacker. You'll be fine defensively in terms of coaching. You just have to hustle and listen to them and follow the script. It should be at the end of the season. Like I said, okay, linebacker and D-line, I'm just okay because I don't know what's going to happen with the depth or who's going to line up everywhere. They really needed a clean spring in terms of injuries, and it, again, just hasn't happened. But, there's nothing you can do about it. I'm curious how spring goes at the end, if there's any new players that are really stepped up. Again, it could be Jamari Flagg, it could be Kevin Wynn. I don't know who it is, but who's that guy? They need somebody else to develop, probably at all 3 levels, and we'll find out. But with that, I'm a little more optimistic overall about Florida State because it sounds like some guys have at least emerged. And again, your center is getting better. That we didn't have any reports like that at all last year, but like a guy's dominating or really good. Any way you want to put it up front, that's probably as good a news as I've heard about Florida State football in a very long time about a practice. That's been a minute. With that, thank you very much for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk Seminoles with me. Hit that like button, that notification bell, and subscribe to the Locked On Seminoles podcast. Love having you in here. At least we got some spring ball to talk about. We got the Final Four this next weekend. You can root against the Gators. Do whatever you want to do with that, but enjoy it regardless. And we got some recruiting news today. That was kind of fun too. Got a commitment. It's been a good day. Everybody have a good one. I will see you again on Tuesday.